The James Show Podcast.
This whole government shutdown thing is something that this is where I really feel divorced from both major political parties. This is where it comes up the most. Budget. I love what the Republicans and Donald Trump have done when it comes to the border. I love what Donald Trump and the Republicans have done when it comes to, reinstituting classic societal norms. I like what they've done on extending the tax cuts from 2017. But this is where the strongest reason I don't register as a Republican is because the Republicans don't really want smaller government. I think government should be smaller. There's about an 80% chance, if you're listening to WBAP right now, you think government should be smaller too. Neither party represents us. Right now, we have a party that wants to grow government, and we have another party that wants to grow government even faster. Now, when they say this is a clean, continuing resolution, that means they're not adding or taking away anything. They're just continuing the exact same baseline that the budget was on previously. I don't know if you remember that, but that baseline was set by the Joe Biden administration, and then we had the first government shutdown scare tactic happen at the end of January. And what did they do? They kicked the can. They voted to continue just through the rest of the year the Biden spending levels. Now, when I say the Biden spending levels, the baseline, we're still doing baseline budgeting. We didn't freeze spending. It's just going to go up at the same 7%. It's always been slated to go up every year. Now, Democrats want to add actually more spending to that. Some of that is changing the work requirements back for welfare and then the Obamacare streamlining that happened. Some of it's just some absolutely new spending. But this is where I get disgusted with both parties. Now, Democrats worse than the Republicans, but Republicans get my contempt in this issue as well. And it's a great example of that. Here's J.D. Vance yesterday talking about the government shutdown, chastising the Democrats.
Well, look, we don't want to shut down the government, Martha, but it's really up to the Democrats. Under our system, you need 60 Senate Democrats to vote for the clean continuing resolution that the president and House Republicans have put forward. I think it's preposterous, Martha. And I think the American people really should pay attention to the fact that Democrats are threatening to shut down the entire government because they want to give hundreds of billions of dollars of health care benefits to illegal aliens. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a political party actually advertising the fact that they want to shut down every essential function of government, and they want to use that as leverage so that they get more money for illegal alien health care benefits. It's such a stark contrast between Republicans who are trying to put the interests of the American people first and Democrats who I think would want to take money from the American people to give benefits to illegal aliens. We don't want to shut down the government, but if Democrats refuse to just pass this clean continuing resolution, that's exactly what's going to happen, and I think the Democrats are going to bear the responsibility for it.
Let me tell you why that's an unacceptable answer. Number one, you know that they're going to oppose anything you want. Anything you put out there, they're going to oppose it. So why not balance a budget and propose that? They're going to fight, they're going to cry, they're going to whine. You're not even trying to balance the budget. You're not even trying to reduce the deficit or reduce spending. You're just going to keep it at the certain levels and hope the economy can grow enough that maybe the deficit will come down. Not because you spent less, it's just because me and you got a little more productive at our jobs. Who is the party that actually wants to cut government? There's not one. For all the people I hear about, so-and-so's a threat to democracy, or Trump's a threat to democracy, or the Republicans are a threat, or MAGA's a threat to democracy. How about the fact that no one in your entire life has been able to go to the ballot box and vote for a party that would actually make government smaller? We have the choice between bigger government or even bigger government. That's not a threat to democracy? That the American people never get a choice to reduce the power of the people in D.C.? That's a threat to democracy. That is a road to authoritarianism. That's a road to tyranny. Government just infinitely grows. Remember, every time government grows, the private sector shrinks. Every new power the government has is a power that's taken away from you. And that counts just for spending dollars. Every time that they have to print money to fill in the deficit because they spent more than they took in, you're getting a pay cut. I'm getting a pay cut. Our paychecks buy less. The things we're trying to buy cost more. And no other issue affects you more directly than the budget. I know it's not as tangible as seeing a bullet go through someone's neck, but it is just as real. The real reason the middle class can't get ahead is inflation. The real reason why the poor are getting poorer is because inflation. The real reason for the people who gripe about how minimum wage isn't a living wage, yeah, that's because we had inflation, geniuses. And there have been arguments made that the average busboy who was making minimum wage in 1960, if he worked a little bit of overtime, he could afford the median house. He could afford a mortgage payment on a median single-family home in America in 1960. The reason why the lowest among us, even in unskilled work, can barely afford an apartment now is inflation. I know you can't see it directly. I know it doesn't get sexy headlines. I know there's no girl in a bikini. I know there's no scary guns or there's no riots or nothing's on fire. But this is ruining my life and it's ruining your life. And neither party is helping you with that. There's one party that wants to give you a 3% pay cut this year. There's another party that wants to give you a 5% pay cut this year. And you can go vote as hard as you want for either one of the two parties, and you're not going to get a break. I find this quite disappointing. If you're a limited government guy, if you are a conservative and you live by conservative principles, wouldn't you be bragging about shutting down the government? And of course, again, that's a misnomer. The government's not shutting down. Like maybe 27% of the workers are going to be temporarily furloughed, get a 2-week vacation, and then they'll get all of their back pay. You're not getting a break even if the government gets shut down. We're not even saving any money if the government gets shut down. It's going to cost us more. If you want a government to be smaller, wouldn't you say, hell yeah, shut it down and keep it shut down? And J.D. Vance look, he sounded like Democrats on that. Well, they want to cut essential services. Look, anything that can be cut it and don't bring it back. Anything that's not an essential service, cut it and don't bring it back. Anything that is being done by the federal government that is not in the Constitution under Article 1, Section 8, where it specifically enumerates like 18 things the federal government can do. If it's outside of that, cut it and don't bring it back. So, yeah, I'm talking about housing and urban development. I'm talking about the Department of Education. And I'm not talking about shut down that building, but we'll just move the Pell Grants and the student loans under the Department of Treasury. No, I mean, get rid of all those dumb functions that they've been doing that has screwed up our education system. But the Republicans aren't doing it. What's the point of voting for Republicans? If you want smaller government, who do you vote for? How do you justify voting for either major party? I don't. And until we have enough people who are just willing to say, I don't care who wins or loses the next election, I am not voting against my principles anymore. I am going to put my foot down on what the founding fathers envisioned for this country and demand my betters put that into practice. Or I'm going to either vote them out in the primary, and if they still win their primary, I'm going to vote third party. I don't care if it's the Constitution Party or the Libertarian Party, or we have like Sean makes up his own party. We'll join that one. But stop voting for this and stop supporting it and speak out against it. And if you're on the right, I expect you to speak out against this. Democrats, you're lost. You want government to be big. You love government. That's fine. But my limited government conservative friends, please follow your principles on this and speak out against this and demand we reduce the size of government. Continuing the Joe Biden spending levels through this entire year, and we're going to hit it in October, which means all y'all lied to me back in January when I said we put our foot down now. They're like, no, this is just till the end of the year. Well, here we are, and now they're just going to keep kicking that can. So I was right back in January. People who told me I was wrong, you owe me an apology. I'm not going to get it. That's okay. Can we just live up to our principles when it comes to this one issue? Because it's killing me, and it's killing you, whether you realize it or not. We have to do this every 6 months or so. We got to pretend like both sides are scared of a shutdown, and it would be terrible. And so when Democrats are in power, the Republicans get blamed. And when Republicans are in power, the Republicans get blamed. I mean, that's what happens when you control the media and the narrative here. But listen, I've always found that if you are the party that represents people who think government should be smaller, shouldn't you be cheering a government shutdown? Wouldn't you love a government shutdown? Because whenever I see these things, they're like, well, we're going to have all non-essential services just put on hold until we can get a budget deal worked out. How about we have all non-essential services fired and the offices closed, never to be refunded again? You mean we're doing non-essential services? At your work, do you have any non-essential services that you're paying for? Why is it that the government gets to grow by 7% every year just a guarantee? Does our population grow by 7% every year? Does the landmass, the territorial borders of the United States grow by 7% every year? Well, then by what morality, ethics, standard, or logic does the government grow by 7% every year? And so kicking the can isn't status quo. Kicking the can is growing government. Maintaining current spending levels are growing government. And we're growing government that already has a deficit that's over $1 trillion a year. And before COVID happened, we only had $1 trillion a year deficit. That was during the Obama porculus package, which was supposed to bring us out of the recession from the financial crisis. It just kind of held our head underwater for about 4 years. And I don't say that as some sort of mean metaphor. It took the S&P 4 years to recover from that after the package passed. So no, it didn't help us rebound at all. Look at how quickly we rebounded in April. Was there any new giant legislative changes passed? Was there any big stimulus package that was passed when our markets dropped 20% in April? No, not at all. In fact, we had negative GDP growth for the first quarter as well without any stimulus. Where are we at now? Markets at all-time highs. GDP growth just got revised up to 3.8%. And I know it's not sexy. I know there's not any boobs involved or children involved or guns involved or drugs involved or celebrities involved. So it's not a sexy topic. But I promise you, this is what affects you and your family the most out of all the stuff we talk about. You know, like the shooting that happened in Michigan, that's terrible. Does it directly affect you? Absolutely not. Does it indirectly affect you? Ooh, boy, that'd be a real stretch if you were going to try to make a connection there. But for every dollar that they spend that they don't take in, you are getting a pay cut. Here's the bad part about it. I recognize it. I have my economic philosophy that recognizes this as something bad that needs to be solved. And I'm stuck with the economic system that the voters want. So I have to get stuck with these bad policies as well. And Democrats, is there any growth of government that you would oppose? And I know military spending, like that part of government. But like, is there any point to where the overall spending you think, that's too big? Is there any annual deficit where you would think, that's too big? Is there any level of inflation where you think, I guess we need to cut government here because that's too tough on the middle class and the poor. Because the rich people don't get hurt by inflation nearly as much as you and me. The wealthiest among us have assets that rise with inflation. You know, that's one of the big important parts about owning a home that can take you out of the bottom class into the middle class. Is, you can go buy a house 10 years ago at $200,000. And then after the inflation that we've seen, it's worth $400,000. So that way, when you leave that house, you actually can cash out and take some of that money with you. You can actually have, while it does hurt you in the meantime, you do get some sort of benefit from inflation at some point. But think about all the assets that the top people have. They own these big buildings downtown. They own the golf course that you play on. They own all these other things that when they go and they sell them, they've appreciated with the declining power of the dollar. And it kind of works in their favor if you're asset based. But here's the real ugly part. It's the people at the bottom that can't get ahead. If you're renting, you don't get to cash in. If you don't own any assets, you don't get to cash in. If you don't have $100,000 in the stock market, you don't have any sort of hedge where that, at least this part of your portfolio rises with inflation as a default. This is the most important issue that affects you the most. And both parties are failing you drastically. You shouldn't be scared of a government shutdown. You should be cheering a government shutdown. And you should go through, when you get a chance, you should read Article 1, Section 8. It gives Congress 18 powers that the federal government can do. And you'll see that most of what we do, more than 70% of the spending that we do at the federal level is unconstitutional. We're not supposed to be providing Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. We're not supposed to be providing a Department of Education and student loans and Pell Grants. We're not supposed to be the housing and urban development and doing Section 8 housing and public housing. We're not supposed to be doing all that. And if we go back and just cut off all this tribal team red, team blue nonsense, and we forget who said what, and just drop it and stick with our principles and return this government to what the founding fathers intended. We return this government to the Constitution. Half of your problems will stop. The other half will stop when we solve the problem of babies being born out of wedlock, but that's the other side of the issue. This is your fiscal problems. There's your societal problems. Who's representing you? Nobody. My next guest is going to put a little more detail on, look, I wish stories like this got more attention because it definitely affects you. All this economic fiscal stuff, this is why you're having a hard time paying bills, especially compared to 5 years ago. Lisa Miller, welcome back on the James Show. She's from Lisa W. Miller and Associates. How bad is the U.S. economy still going through inflation?
Well, the numbers first of all, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. And the data just came back out on Friday, and it's a little bit complicated for, I think, Americans, because on one side, personal consumption did inch up a little bit, but then the consumer sentiment from University of Michigan fell 5 points. So it's kind of interesting that spending is up, but then consumers aren't feeling so good about it. But I do 1,000 surveys every month. And what I'm just seeing is this complexity of, that expression average is awful. So there's different demographic groups that are really struggling versus those that are maybe not having as tough a go of it.
Well, the second quarter GDP number got revised up a bunch. Wasn't it like a 0.5%, which sounds like a small number, but as far as GDP revisions, that's huge. Then that sounds like it would be overwhelmingly good news, if not for the inflation.
Right. And I think they just adjusted that to be like 0.4. But here's the crazy thing. So, most people listening going 0.4, that doesn't sound like very much at all. But when you think about a big GDP number, it's massive, to your point. But here's what's going on. There's a difference between kind of how we're feeling maybe a little bit worse than what the economy actually, the data is. But let me just give you a little bit of context. So my survey, I just got back on Friday as well, 1,000 consumers across the country. And overall, the anxiety and fear about the economy did inch up from my data about 3 points, but it's been going up all summer. So inched up a little bit in July, a little bit more in August, and a little bit more in September. But here's the dichotomy is that, not surprising, there's an income skew. So if you're making lower income, you're going to be struggling a little bit more versus higher. But the surprise is, people like Gen Z, who you would think would be very anxious about the economy, they're one of the least anxious, where Gen X is actually the most anxious. So there's these really interesting, unexpected differences of who's really anxious and who's not.
Gen X usually gets overlooked in these surveys, so thank you for including us, Lisa Miller. So how does this compare to where we were, say, like a year ago?
So it's actually the numbers are, what I look for is the gap, James. So I look for the gap of how many people say they're spending as usual versus how many people say they're fearful and they're kind of stopping. And what I'm seeing is the gap between those two numbers, which my data tends to be leading indicator of the economy, is that gap is pretty big right now versus where it was a year ago. And so I think that is indicative of kind of why I think some cohorts are just not spending. And Gen X is definitely one of them. And you think about if, Gen X are turning 60 this year, James, the oldest of Gen X. And so if they have older children that might be going into college, and there's just all these expenses that, Gen X are kind of facing these days. But I will say the violence that's been happening and some of everything that's going on, 4 in 10 Americans are basically saying, I'm not going outside. I'm not doing my regular activities just because of the fear of the rising violence. And I don't think we talk enough about that, but it's terrible, everything that's been going on just in general for the country, but it actually does have also an unintended consequence that people just aren't, they're concerned and they're fearful. So it's just, they're not going to be going out to eat or to the movies and things like that as their general behaviors.
Well, Lisa Miller, my experience is I live in both worlds. I work here in downtown Dallas. I have a house out in Bug Tussle, middle of nowhere. And the people in the city are real nervous and anxious and worried about crime, looking over the shoulder and what was that noise. The people who live out in the middle of nowhere are just chill. We don't have a violence problem out there. We don't have a crime problem out there. We don't have things that are locked up at the CVS because crime is so bad. So it seems to be a huge disparity in your geography on whether or not you're happy with the way things are going.
You are so right, and I don't have the data handy, but one of the things I do have, which now I'm kind of one of those curious people, is I actually have a question that is urban versus suburban versus rural, and I actually haven't looked at that data on this anxiousness measure lately. So you've inspired me, James, to go look that up.
I would love to see that too. I've never seen hard data on that. Send it, James at WBAP.com. That's my email. Okay, Lisa?
I will definitely send it to you because I think there is something to it. And I do see that the data, which is interesting, in the Midwest, people are more anxious about the economy versus the West is less anxious. So I also found that kind of curious right now.
Interesting. All right. Well, you can find her book, The Business of Joy, on Amazon. If you need some of her services, Lisa W. Miller. Thank you very much for being on The James Show again.
The James Show Podcast.